Welcome to Doors to Hope and Healing, an inside look at foster care and adoption needs in Connecticut. My name is Jacqueline Ford. I have had the honor of working for the department for close to 30 years, and although I may be familiar with many of the topics I bring to you, I have invited experts in those fields to help dispel the myths and misconceptions that often act as barriers. Join us as we open our doors to an inside look at the Department of Children and Families. Welcome to Doors to Hope and Healing. It's so nice to have you back on our show. And I believe that since the last time you were here, you have a new role with the agency. What is your new position?
On the show. Currently, I'm the Bureau Chief for External Affairs for the department. I think the last time I came here, I was overseeing our Office of the Ombudsman. So certainly a lot of changes have occurred since Commissioner Durantis came on and she named a new executive team.
And you're a part of that. So congratulations on the work that you're going to be doing. Can you talk about the Bureau of External Affairs, the purpose, and I believe there's 3 parts.
There are. So Commissioner designed her executive team with a number of core components, certainly all of which intersect amongst each other. So we have Deputy Commissioner Michael Williams and Deputy Commissioner Jody Hill-Lilly. We have our Bureau Chief for Strategic Planning, Trina Mazzata, our Legal Director, Maureen Duggan, and myself, Bureau Chief of External Affairs. And so that division was really designed to oversee the external-facing components of the department. And there's really 3 subsets underneath that Bureau. So the first one is that I still oversee our Community Relations Department, which we renamed from the Office of the Ombudsman. So this is still the unit where individuals in the community, families, youth, foster parents, community members at large, can call and ask questions about the department's work, express perhaps a concern about a specific case, and work through a problem. We renamed that unit Community Relations because we want to get more in front of issues, not just simply wait for a complaint or a problem to come to our attention. And we have Ann Adams now as director of that unit, and it's working very, very well. Second component under the Bureau is I oversee our legislative work. So our legislative liaison is Vinny Russo. He's also only been with us for a year, very, very seasoned in legislative work, coming from probate, knows literally everybody at the Capitol. And the legislative work, really, we're trying to make it a 12-month out of the year process. So in not only tapping into our legislative support when we want to pass a new bill or have budgetary issues, we are bringing in our legislators to our meetings in our regional offices and facilities. We're including them in our correspondence and newsletters to ensure that we have a legislative presence in our work, but also our staff are exposed to our legislators so they understand what they need from the department and we understand how we can meet their needs and answer their questions as well. And lastly, we have communications under the Bureau. So Gary Kleeblatt is our Director of Communications, and we're taking a different approach to communications in the sense that we are really trying to be much more proactive in writing more stories of our own to celebrate and highlight the great work that the department does, not simply wait to be reactive when we are asked a question by our media. And we can get into some of the specific ways that we're putting out those stories and getting the message out about the department at a later time.
And before we talk about that, when you talked about public relations and communications, is there a piece in there of work that you're doing to try to change the public's perception of DCF and the way that the agency operates?
Absolutely. We know that when individuals in the community mention DCF, a couple things happen. First of all, there may be a negative initial reaction. And also that negative reaction is really based on what we consider a lot of misinformation about our department. 91.5% of the time that we knock on a family's door, families stay together. They are stronger, we think, because of the services that we can implement for them. As families stay together, they're intact, and permanency-wise, children then grow up in their own families. But yet, I think if we asked a lot of people in the community, they would say, well, 91% of the time you knock on a door, children are removed. And that's just not true. Even those children that have to be removed, about 60% of them do go home. and are reunified two parents that are healthier, stronger, and have worked through whatever it is that that issue was that precipitated and led to that child's removal. So really getting out into the community and listening to people, but then utilizing the opportunities to really explain what the department does, utilizing statistics in that way to help others in the community understand that when you call the department, you're actually calling for a family who you're concerned about, but yet we are there then to help, to implement community-based services, some of which we fund, some of which are grassroots organizations. And at the end of the day, the fundamental belief that we have about families and what I believe the public value is for our department is strengthening families so they can take care of their own without government intervention. And that's no easy task, but I think we've made some great strides in the year that Commissioner Durantis has led our agency.
Yeah, that year really seemed to have flown by. Last time I had her on, it was a year ago.
It is strange to think that literally 12 months ago, she began. It was actually last week that the commissioner mentioned to us that it was her day that she was officially sworn in as commissioner, and time has flown by. But again, a lot of tremendous work, and actually we're putting together some information that we're going to send out to the public and our media and our legislators about the 2019 highlights and what we are most proud of that we were able to accomplish in the first year, but then concurrently point individuals to where we want to go with what we call our 2020 vision and the goals that we have now set over the next 12 months. So a lot of great work was done, a lot of tremendous work and excitement about what the future is looking like and shaping up to be.
And having worked for DCF for almost 30 years now, I know how hard the work is. And I know that with communications, it's not only important to do external communications, it's also important to celebrate our staff. Yeah. So I understand you have a newsletter, Spotlight on What's Right. Can you talk to us about that?
We do. Very proud of that. So on a monthly basis, the staff under the Bureau of External Affairs puts together a newsletter. And very simply, it is a document filled with stories that are highlighting the great things that the department has done over the past month and the particular efforts that our own individual staff make that we really consider are above and beyond the norm. The reason why we are generating this is because this is, again, is an opportunity for us to tell our story about our own people. And what's great is that every one of the stories that we have put in that newsletter, and we've had 4 of them come out now, have actually made their way to what we call the mainstream media around Connecticut. In fact, one of our stories has now been featured via the Associated Press. So to give you an example of that, we had a worker in New Haven named Tamika Saunders who had a beautiful relationship with a baby who actually never made it out of the ICU for over 4.5, almost 5 months. Tamika visited that little boy literally every day that he was alive. And to the point where she had such a relationship with him, the hospital staff actually thought she was this little boy's mother. Oh. So again, we recognize the care our children need on our caseloads, but to think that Tamika was there on the weekends and at night, sometimes 2 to 3 times a day, to ensure this little boy had a relationship with somebody outside of that hospital staff was remarkable. One of our stories highlighted Anthony Gay, who's a supervisor in our Torrington office.
We've had Anthony on the show.
You know, again, just a beautiful resource and spokesman for the department. Despite all of Anthony's tremendous work on fatherhood and including fathers in case planning and really raising awareness, he suffered his own tragedy of his own son dying very unexpectedly. But then we highlighted, as much as Anthony was in pain, he was blessed with his newborn son, Noah. So here's this strong individual that went from such a painful time to realizing now there's so much more in life and celebrating that. This last month, one of our favorite newsletters came out. We called it Home for the Holidays, where we celebrated youth that actually were reunified and went home or stayed home because of those community relationships and the partnerships we had with agencies that we work with. One boy in particular was reunified with his father overseas. Wow. It was an amazing story of how we found this man, how we worked with him despite the fact he was overseas to be reunified with his son. Another story was a young mom who was just wonderful in the way she articulated her story. She suffered for many years with substance use and other related issues, and lost two of her children who were being raised by, I believe, her parents. She then had a third child, and because of the supportive housing program that a particular community partner of ours has in place, that the department funds, she received the right services at the right time and is successfully raising her third child.
Wow, in home.
So when you look at those newsletters and you read the stories, I think you get a different view of the department. And also we are saying to our 3,200 internal staff, look at these great people all around you. So tomorrow our next newsletter is coming out. We're very excited about that. We're highlighting a couple of our youth who actually grew up in care and are now, one of which is a DCF worker herself, and another one who has gone on to be an honor student at the University of Connecticut. So really great stuff, and again, a way to get the message out about our department. Newsletter goes to our internal staff, our legislators. We have a external media contact list that we send them to. And we send them as well to over 500, maybe even 600 now, of our community partners. So the word is getting out. We have individuals that contact us all the time to say, hey, look over here. I have a colleague that did something really good, or look at my youth in care. We're really trying to focus as well on those joint collaborative stories that we have with our partners. And I use the term partner deliberately, as far as those people that we work closely with in the community, some of which are contracted providers that we provide funding to, some of which are grassroots organizations, some of which are individual therapists or people that have their own practices. And we also say partners of our own sister state agencies in the great collaborative work that we do. So we're excited about this.
And that was my question. How do you find out about these great stories from the staff internally or from community providers? Do you have a network of reaching out to people, or people know that they can share that information?
So it's an interesting question, because at first when we were thinking about the newsletter, we happen to fall into the stories. So for example, the commissioner and the executive team would be in an office, and in each one of the offices, we have an opportunity for staff to acknowledge the great work that goes on around them. So we would hear these stories. Now we're receiving calls and emails and pictures and text messages saying, hey, I went to this community event and one of our staff did a presentation on domestic minor sex trafficking. Here's the picture, and the community loved them. So we'll put that on Twitter and our Facebook account, and then we'll highlight that in our newsletter. So the happy problem is that we actually have, I think, so much material now. Now it's about organizing it versus going out and seeking information. And you know what, Jackie, what I find ironic about all this is that I always knew, working here for 30 years, of those unique contributions our staff make to the work. The question was, how do you raise them up so others hear about them and can celebrate them along with those internal staff of the department? And I think the newsletter has been successful so far in achieving that goal, and they are posted on our websites. And
yeah, I was just going to say, if you can, is it CT Foster Adopt, and they can find them posted there?
I believe ctfosteradopt.com. I believe just also our regular, DCF website as well, and we will ensure that they are clearly identified, because the stories really are great, and they are inspiring when you take a step back and look at what's able to be accomplished when the parts of the system do come together and work collaboratively.
I know they're easy to read, and I've read them, and the stories inspire you, and you feel proud to be a part of this team when you see what your coworkers and colleagues are doing. Why do you feel it's important for the community to understand internally and to lift them up, and we want our staff to be celebrated? What about the community? Why do you think it's important that the community not only knows about the good work that our staff are doing, but also that they know exactly what's happening behind our doors?
Sure. We recognize as an agency with maybe almost an $800 million budget and the complex organizational structure that we have, there's a lot of misunderstandings or perhaps a lot of confusion about who the department is, and rightfully so. We are an incredibly large state agency. We want the public to value the Department of Children and Families. We want to continue to create and build upon the public value that we already have in so many other individuals' eyes. So when we bring forth a positive story, a success, highlighting one of our workers who grew up in care and felt disempowered, but now through, for example, our youth advisory board, felt like she regained her voice and went on to graduate from college and get a master's degree. When you read a story about an individual such as Ashley, which is coming out tomorrow, I think it allows those outside of the department not to look at us as social workers, but also as people, and to understand the values that we have and the mission that we aspire to, and the calling that so many of our staff believe this work really is, which is far and apart from just simply a job. So really the goal here is to build confidence in the community, also to raise awareness about what work we do. So for the individual who's sitting at home and maybe reading our newsletter on the computer or hearing something about us on the news, it's going to trigger for them perhaps a family in need, maybe one of their own family members, and they'll be more encouraged, inspired to pick up the phone and call us, knowing that they're going to get help, not just have those children removed or not just make things worse for that family.
Right.
And we know that's difficult, and we know that we have a lot of work to do in our messaging, with our staff directly on the ground who touch families every day, but all taking the direction from the executive team and the commissioner about the value, the mission, the priorities of our work. So.
Well, I welcome you to come back on the show, and I know we have a few more questions to talk about, but in the future to bring on people who can talk about that community outreach and the ways that we're improving, this show in itself, we're hoping to dispel those myths and misconceptions that are out there, and we hope that our viewers at Doors to Open Healing have a better understanding of our agency and the many facets, because we've covered, the educational piece and the sex trafficking and human trafficking and foster care, adoption. So we're trying for them to understand that we're not just a child welfare agency that places children.
Exactly. And what I would think is always important is to continue to bring on a diverse group of folks who can give a little bit different message about their scope of work with the department. In the near future, we'd like to come back and bring on some of our staff that have been in the forefront of what we call our Family First work. So the federal government in 2018 passed the Family First Prevention Services Act legislation. So what does that mean? That means that the federal government now is shifting reimbursement to states for their federal funding from the back end of the system to the front. Meaning right now, we receive federal funding to reimburse us for the costs associated with children in foster care and who are placed in congregate care. Once the department moves certain pieces of our work forward, we will be in a position to receive federal funding for those services to prevent children from being placed into out-of-home care. Now, I'm sure individuals who are out there and listening to the show are thinking, well, that only makes sense. It sure does. And we're realizing more and more, and now the federal government is really taking the lead to say, okay, wait a minute. For those children that have to be removed, we recognize there's going to need to be placements. But what can we do to prevent removals, to ensure children stay at home safely? And if you can find those evidence-based services and collaborate with partners, both public and private, we will reimburse you for those services, which will allow states to invest more at the front end of the system and the back end. Connecticut has approximately 4,000 children in care now. It's too many. It's too many. Over 60% of the children that get removed nationally are removed not because of physical abuse or sexual abuse, it's because of neglect. So what are those services that are best for families and most timely for families so the problems don't escalate, so children can remain safely with their parents while their parents work on those interpersonal and societal issues that are impacting their parenting, which will lead to less children in care and more children growing up with their families. And I think Connecticut should be very proud of the work that we've done, especially over the past 10 years, because many of the core values that the Family First legislation speaks to, Connecticut already has embedded in our work. Mm-hmm. We believe in Connecticut children are best served safely in their own home, being raised by their own families. Hence, 91.5% of the time we knock on the door, children stay together. The legislation points to if children cannot remain at home, services should be put to support kinship placements. So children live with relatives or those individuals they have a familial relationship with. Mm-hmm. Well, Connecticut right now has 45% of our children placed into kinship care. And one of the last core components of this new legislation is to ensure that children, if they need a non-family setting, i.e. congregate care, mm-hmm. are only placed there for a short period of time to receive treatment, not as a placement. Mm. Connecticut has approximately 6% of our youth in congregate care. We're one of the leaders across the country in that number being so small. Mm-hmm. So we're really proud that we already have so many of the core components of Family First embedded in our work. We think with this legislation moving forward and with some now new funding and new reimbursements coming back to the state, our work at the front end will only be enhanced. And it's very, 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 very exciting. But most importantly, it's the right thing for families and children.
Well, it's exciting and it's impressive, and I'm excited to see how that's going to all roll out and the changes that are going to happen. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Awesome.
Now we're going to go to a video of Charlize, who is a young lady who is looking for her forever home. Thank you for watching.
I actually like to do a little bit of everything. I like to sing, I like to dance, I like to play with my friends, I like to go outside, I like to ride bikes. The thing I like about school best is I like that they understand me, I like that they help me, I like that they give me second chances. I like math because there's always a twist in it, and you always get to learn something fun, and I think it just challenges me to do better. The perfect family for me, have a older brother, maybe a little sister, because I just love children. I would want someone to not judge me for my mistakes, but I want them to still love me for who I am. And I'm not gonna pretend to be someone I'm not. I'm just gonna be me. And I hope they just accept me for me. I like pets because they really can get you to a place that a human just wouldn't understand. If I was with a friend and they felt sad, I would give them this advice. And I would say, what's the matter? You shouldn't be down because life is just too short. And it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile. I don't want to act for too much, but just love and affection. So I want basically to have what I never had. I love life, I love learning, I just love everything around me. But I'm not perfect, I'm gonna make mistakes, and I learn from them, so that's what makes me special and unique.